The snow had come early that year, heavier, crueler. It fell in thick silence over the roofs of North Bend like a hush laid over a grave. And somewhere beneath that hush, a child vanished. 1 minute, 5-year-old Noah West was chasing his own breath in the backyard, tossing snow in wide arcs like he was casting spells. The next, he was simply gone. No cries, no tracks, just a red mitten left behind, fingers curled in the powder as if still reaching for something or someone. That morning, the light had been strange, a flat, grey haze that made the edges of the world feel blurred. His father, Eli, had stepped out with a mug of coffee and a promise to call him in soon. He remembers pausing by the back door, watching his boy just for a moment, laughing in his oversized boots. It was the last sound the house would hold for a very long time. By the time the neighbors gathered, wrapped in coats and confusion, the snow had already erased the story. No footprints led away from the swing set. No broken branches in the trees. Just an empty silence pressing in on all sides. And then 8 winters passed without him. But that wasn't the end. This morning, the dog across the street had started barking. It was a deep, guttural bark, not urgent, but pointed, like it was calling attention to something it could sense and no one else could see. The wind carried it across the narrow street where Eli sat at the kitchen table, same place he'd sat every day for years, surrounded by fading police reports and brittle hope. He hadn't meant to look up, but something in the way the bark pierced the rhythm of the wind made him raise his head. Through the frosted glass, he saw Walter Greer, his reclusive neighbor, hunched near an old dog kennel tucked into the far corner of his yard. And the dog, a large German shepherd, unfamiliar and new, was fixated on the kennel's floor, digging, pacing, growling low. Eli narrowed his eyes. Walter had no family, no dog, not since the break-in that took his wife and son. That had been a decade ago. He never mentioned getting a new pet, never mentioned much of anything. But now, he was building something, expanding the kennel, repainting the fence, moving with a kind of urgency Eli hadn't seen in years. And the dog that barking it had a rhythm, like a clock ticking towards something that had already begun. The story continued, but in a way no one expected. Eli and Maren West had once been known for their warmth. Teachers, both of them a pair of calm souls in a town too small for secrets. But secrets have a way of planting themselves where the ground is softest. And grief, when it settles, changes the architecture of a house. Maren still washed Noah's sheets every spring. She still closed his bedroom door slowly, with both hands, as if afraid it would shatter. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in years. She just existed beside the hollow. Eli wasn't quite as graceful. He spent his days tracing old maps of the neighborhood, chasing fragments of unconfirmed sightings and revisiting leads that had long since been ruled out. He knew it was irrational, but to stop would be to admit the silence had won, and that he could never do. Every house in North Bend had aged since Noah vanished except theirs. Theirs was a time capsule, sealed by longing. A ghost house, waiting for a child who never came home. That morning, when the barking started, Eli's mind didn't jump to fear. Not right away. It jumped to the oddness of Walter, to the way the man had recently begun shoveling paths in his backyard, not just to the garage, but to that kennel, that corner, over and over, even in deep snow. Eli stepped outside. The cold met him like a memory, sharp, uninvited, and too familiar. Across the street, Walter stood with his back turned, his shoulders hunched as he adjusted something inside the kennel. But the moment Eli's boots crunched down on the snow, Walter straightened too fast, too stiffly, and he placed himself between Eli's gaze and whatever lay beneath that kennel floor. There was nothing accusatory in Eli's voice when he offered to help fix the fence. He even smiled, a small, tired thing. But Walter shook his head, eyes twitching to the side, muttering something about the dog needing time to adjust. And still the dog barked, not at Eli, not at Walter, at something else. That night, after Marin convinced him to invite Walter over for dinner, "It's time," she'd whispered, her voice thin as paper. Eli couldn't shake the image. The bark, the dog, the floor beneath the kennel. Something was wrong. Not loud, not obvious, but off. Like a note slightly out of tune that only a parent still listening for laughter would notice. They set the table with the good plates. Marin lit candles. She even smiled, a brief, flickering thing, like hope pretending not to be fragile. But Walter never returned. Not yet. And just when she thought it was over, it began again. The storm came in sudden, snarling waves, a moaning wind that bent the trees like bones and sheared the corner post of Eli's fence clean off. By morning, the snowfall had quieted, but it left behind a jagged opening that exposed the West's yard to the one across the street. Eli noticed it while pouring his second cup of coffee. The kind of detail he would have missed years ago. But now, small shifts in the landscape felt personal, felt ominous. By midday, the sky had cleared just enough for him to cross the street, boots crunching in the crusted snow. He found Walter already outside, hammer in hand, patches of new wood grafted crudely to the remains of the fence. "Didn't mean to trouble you," Eli said, trying not to sound too cautious. "I would have fixed it myself." Walter looked up, his breath clouded between them. "Didn't want it dragging into your yard," he muttered, tapping a nail into place with mechanical precision. "Had the tools out anyway." Eli hesitated. The fence wasn't the only thing that looked recently disturbed. In the far corner of Walter's yard stood the old kennel, a lopsided wooden structure that hadn't housed a dog in nearly 10 years. But now, something had changed. The snow around it had been cleared. A shovel leaned nearby, handle still wet. "You thinking about getting another dog?" Eli asked, casually. Walter didn't look at him. "Just fixing up the old place." "Might get one. Haven't decided." Eli tilted his head. "Well, If you want help with the build, I've still got my old tool chest. Be nice to work with someone again." Walter's eyes flicked toward him quick, unreadable. Then back to the boards. "Appreciate it, but I've got it handled." And just like that, the air between them cooled again. But the image lingered in Eli's mind all evening. The freshly shoveled path, the new planks nailed to the kennel, the way Walter had stood just a little too squarely in front of it, as if there was something behind him he didn't want seen. And from somewhere behind that silence came a sound Eli hadn't heard in years. A dog bark. Not just any bark, urgent, sharp, insistent. The kind of sound that cut through snow-thick air like a siren. He looked out the window. And sure enough, Walter was back in the yard. But this time, he wasn't alone. A German shepherd strained against a short lead, its ears fixed not on Walter, not on the fence, but on the kennel, barking so hard its whole body vibrated with the force of it. Eli stepped closer to the glass. The dog's eyes were fixed low, not on the door of the kennel, but just beneath it. Its nails scraped at the snow, kicking up white dust as it circled and returned to the same spot, over and over. That kennel, it wasn't just repaired. It had changed. It sat slightly higher off the ground now. Its base had been reinforced, and though the snow covered most of the detail, Eli could just make out something new, a faint metallic edge beneath the floorboards. Something the dog clearly smelled. The next day brought no answers, just more questions. Eli drove out for groceries, trying to shake the image of that dog, pacing, digging, fixated. But as he turned onto the highway, he spotted a car he recognized. Walter's blue sedan, heading in the opposite direction. And he wasn't with friends, as he'd claimed that morning. He was alone. Eli followed not deliberately at first, but with growing suspicion. He watched as Walter pulled into North Bend Kennels, a dog breeder just outside town. Parked, got out, spoke briefly with someone near the entrance, and left less than 10 minutes later with a travel kennel in the back seat, occupied. It wasn't the timing that made Eli's stomach twist. It was the lie, the ease of it. Back at home, the German shepherd was there, pacing, barking again too, and Walter wouldn't meet his eyes. That night, as the snow returned in soft whispering flurries, Eli stood at the window long after Marin had gone to bed. His breath fogged the glass. Across the street, a single light glowed from Walter's kitchen. The kennel sat in shadow, but the dog was still staring at it, still barking, deep and rhythmic, as if it was trying to summon something buried or warn something alive. And just when Eli thought it might stop, might settle, the wind shifted, and he heard it, the sound of something metallic beneath wood. Not loud, just enough to make the breath catch in his throat. There was more buried deeper, waiting to surface. The wind hadn't let up for 3 days. It blew through North Bend like it remembered something. Something cold and long buried. Eli couldn't sleep. Not anymore. Not since the dog had arrived. He told himself it was nothing. Told Marin he was just thinking too much. But late at night, with the snow whispering against the windows and the dog still barking in bursts across the street, the truth settled in his chest like ice. Something was wrong in Walter's yard. The next morning, Eli walked over with an old socket wrench in his hand, a neighborly excuse. Said he had a spare fence bracket if Walter needed it. Said it like he meant it. But Walter wasn't home. The German shepherd greeted him with a growl that quickly turned into a bark. Not wild, not aggressive. Warning. It stood stiffly at the edge of its chain, head low, body angled toward the kennel. Eli approached, one cautious step at a time. The kennel was squat, wide, its edges too precise to be leftover lumber. It smelled faintly of fresh sawdust and old metal. A tarp had been pulled over part of the roof, still wet with melting snow. The dog barked again, louder this time. Eli knelt down, and there it was just under the lip of the boards. A thin metal latch, not rusted, not forgotten, something deliberate, hidden in plain sight. He reached toward it, just brushing his fingers against the edge. The dog lunged on its chain, snarling, claws dragging lines through the snow. Eli stumbled back, heart pounding, hand trembling. Not from the dog. Not really. From the trap door it was guarding. He didn't mention it to Marin that evening. She had made roast chicken and lit the candles again. She was trying, and after so many years of gray. Eli couldn't bring himself to crush her effort with a feeling he couldn't yet explain. At 6 sharp, Walter knocked. He looked ordinary. A bottle of wine in one hand, his breath still visible in the frigid air. He stepped inside like nothing was wrong, like the world wasn't shifting beneath their feet. They ate, they spoke about nothing, the weather, the storm, a new traffic light going up near the library. But beneath every word was tension, the kind you don't see until the glass cracks. Eli asked about the dog, gently. Said it was good to see Walter open up again. Said he'd heard the barking. Walter's fork paused midair. Still adjusting, he mumbled, "Takes time." "And the kennel?" Eli asked, his tone so light it almost vanished. Saw the improvements. Pretty solid work. Hidden latch under the floor. Clever stuff. Walter's eyes sharpened. "Just for a second I put. Not much of a latch," he said, too quickly. "It's just bracing. For warmth." Silence stretched. The candles flickered, long shadows dancing across the table. "I used to build tree houses for Noah," Eli said suddenly, voice low. "Always made sure they had secret panels. Little places to hide things. You'd be surprised how much a kid values a hiding place." Walter didn't answer. He took a sip of wine. His hand was shaking. Moments later, he stood up too fast, knocking his chair slightly askew. "The dog," he muttered, already moving toward the door. "Left him out too long. This storm's not letting up." "You sure?" Marin asked gently. "We're just about to cut the pie." But Walter was already pulling on his boots. Without his coat, he stepped into the snow like a man slipping into cold water, vanishing into the night. His coat remained on the hook by the door, heavy, wool, and inside one pocket, something hard. Eli waited until the door had fully closed, reached in, keys, a small flashlight, and a folded scrap of yellowed notebook paper. On it, a child's drawing, a house, a tree, a red sun, and a name written in block letters. Noah. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was a scream muffled beneath years of snow. And just when Eli thought the worst was behind him, the truth began to claw its way to the surface. The coat was heavier than it looked. Eli crossed the street with it tucked under his arm, the wool catching flakes of snow that hadn't yet melted. Walter hadn't returned. Not in the minutes after he left dinner. Not in the half hour that followed. His plate still sat on the table, half finished, steam long gone cold. At first, Eli had told himself it was nothing. Just concern for the dog. Just the awkward exit of a man who never truly re-entered the world. But the drawing changed that. The way Noah's name had been scrawled across the paper, unsteady, innocent, recent. The kind of lettering a child might write if he'd been taught by someone who remembered what it looked like, but not how it felt. Eli knocked. Once, twice. No answer. The windows were dark. No movement behind the curtain. The porch light hadn't been turned on, and there were no footprints in the fresh layer of snow leading back to the front door. And yet, the dog was still outside. Its barking tore through the quiet like a warning bell. Eli followed the sound around to the backyard. The night brittle and sharp around him. The shepherd was straining against its tether, again this time more frantically, head down, body rigid, barking at the same patch of earth beneath the kennel. The same spot. Again and again. Eli approached slowly, flashlight in hand now, its beam catching on the frost, lining the kennel's roof. The structure looked different in the dark, not like a shelter, but like a box built to contain. He crouched, brushing snow away from the floor. The latch was there, not rusted, not forgotten. A solid metal loop with a recessed grip set into the wood. Eli hesitated. The dog snarled, then whined a low, mournful sound that vibrated in his chest. And then he opened it. The trapdoor lifted with a soft creak, revealing a square of blackness cut clean into the earth. Cold air rushed upward, stale and metallic, edged with something older, the scent of a place sealed too long. and stairs. Metal, narrow, leading down into silence. Eli called out once. His voice didn't echo. It was swallowed whole. Still, he stepped down. The light from his flashlight caught unfinished walls, concrete, pipes, wires, a mattress pushed into a corner, blankets stacked neatly, a tin basin, drawings taped to the wall, stick figures with helmets, maps with red arrows, words in all caps. Enemy zones. Watch the sky, but trust no one. Then a sound, not behind him, but below. Movement, bare feet on metal. Quick. Eli turned, and there, rising up from the black, a figure, thin, shaking, barely more than a shadow. The boy climbed into the light, shielding his eyes like it burned. Pale skin, reddish hair tangled and unwashed. A gray hoodie zip-tied over his chest. And in his trembling hands, a pistol. "Stay back," the boy said, his voice cracking. "You don't belong here." Eli froze. The boy's eyes were wide, feral with fear, like an animal raised without light. He didn't blink. His chest rose and fell too fast. The pistol wavered slightly, like he wasn't used to its weight. "I don't want to hurt you," Eli said softly, arms raised. I just need to know your name." The boy's lips parted, but he didn't speak. He glanced behind him, then back, sweat beading along his brow despite the cold. "You're the enemy," he whispered. "You came to destroy the outpost. Dad said you would." "Your dad?" Eli asked, his voice breaking. "You mean Walter?" The boy flinched. "No," he said, louder now. "Dad. My dad." Eli stepped closer, slowly, careful not to spook him, careful not to fall apart. He could see it now under the dirt. The malnutrition, the fear the boy's face, the tilt of the nose, the curve of his jaw. Noah. It was him. The flashlight trembled in Eli's hand. "You were 5, he said quietly, tears blurring the beam. "You wore red boots and used to eat snow when you thought we weren't looking. You liked the sound it made when it crunched between your teeth." Noah blinked. Something flickered in his eyes, a thread of memory, a crack in the lie. I don't remember," he murmured. Footsteps behind them. A sudden shift in the air. And then Walter emerged from the shadows, from some side passage unseen. The same way he'd always moved through the neighborhood unnoticed, until he was right there. He had a rifle in his hands, not raised yet, but gripped with purpose. "Back away from him," Walter said, his voice flat, hollow. "He's not yours." Eli stepped in front of Noah instinctively, shielding the boy. "Walter," he breathed. "What did you do?" Walter's eyes darted to the pistol in Noah's hands, and then to Eli. "I protected him," he said, "from a world that gave up, from parents who left him behind. Eli shook his head. You stole him. I saved him. Walter snapped. There's a war. Always has been. I gave him shelter. Taught him how to survive. He's a child, Eli said, voice rising. You buried him in a lie. A sound above. The crunch of tires. The whir of lights. Sirens. Walter's eyes widened. Maren had called. Eli saw it then. The panic behind Walter's mask. The collapse of a reality only one person had ever believed in. You can't take him, Walter said, raising the gun now. But Noah, his hands shaking, eyes wild with confusion, stepped between them. Dad, he whispered. Walter looked at him, really looked. And for a second, there was something like softness in his expression. I kept you safe, he said, you were mine. But behind them, the door opened wide. Flashlights. Shouting. Police, drop your weapon. Chaos blurred. Eli pulled Noah aside. Officers surged forward. The rifle hit the floor. And Walter surrendered without a word. As the boy sobbed in Eli's arms, trembling and lost, he whispered the only word that made sense anymore. Why? Eli held him tighter. You're safe now, he said. That's all that matters. But the most important part hadn't even begun. They brought him home slowly. Not all at once. Not with balloons or cameras or open arms waiting to be filled. Just quiet steps. Careful ones. Like re-entering a house after a fire, not knowing what might still smolder inside. Noah didn't recognize the place. Not the walls, or the hallway, with the pencil marks that once measured his height. Not the scent of Maren's lavender soap lingering in the bathroom. Not even the room that had stayed untouched for 8 years, his bed still made. A stuffed fox still resting on the pillow, where a small head had once dreamed. But something in the way his mother looked at him, it made him stop, made him pause, just for a moment, before stepping in. There was something safe in her eyes. Not familiar, not yet, but true. He didn't hug her, couldn't. His body didn't quite know how, but he stood close, let her brush his hair back, let her whisper his name like it was a song she'd been singing into the dark. Noah. And in her voice, he heard something he hadn't heard in a long, long time. He wasn't sure what to call it, but it didn't feel like a lie. Eli sat in the doorway of the room for most of that first night. He didn't try to force a conversation. He just sat, breathing quietly. One hand resting on the doorframe like it might keep the world from shifting again. Noah didn't sleep. He just watched the ceiling, as if waiting for it to crack open. Therapy began 2 days later. The doctors spoke gently, slowly. One asked him to draw. Another gave him blocks to build with. Then watched what he made. Most of the time, he said nothing. But once, he asked for a red crayon and drew a house and a tree and a sun with too many rays. In the corner, he wrote 3 words, not names, just letters. Wusuf. It would take months before he'd speak of the drills, the rules, the punishment for contact with the enemy. How Walter had made him rehearse, hiding in darkness at the sound of footsteps. How he'd learned to sleep light, to shoot if necessary, to fear the sky. They said it might take years to unlearn what had been done, that the mind, when sealed too long in a false world, does not walk easily into the truth. But he was trying. One night, Amaran found him sitting in the hallway, tracing the edge of a photo frame. It was a picture of him as a toddler, cheeks round, smile wide, arms reaching up towards someone just out of frame. "Who's that?" he asked. She swallowed. "That's you? And your dad?" Noah stared at it a long time, then looked up. "Was I different?" She knelt beside him. "You were still you," she said softly. "You always have been." Walter never spoke again. He remained silent through the hearings, the interviews, the evaluations. The journals they found beneath the kennel told the rest of the story, page after page of spiraling logic, delusions rendered in ink, plans, maps, commands, not just survival routines, but blueprints for a different life. One where his dead son had returned in a new name, in a new body. And Noah, in that twisted story, had become the replacement. Investigators catalogued everything beneath the trapdoor. A bunker designed not just for shelter, but for belief. Drawings pinned to the walls like doctrine. A child's bed built beside a weapons rack. A box of old toys beside a stack of military training manuals. 8 years of a stolen childhood, frozen in dust and discipline. But upstairs in the house across the street, life was beginning again. Eli repainted the kitchen, not to change the past, but to give it room to breathe. Maren started humming while she cleaned something she hadn't done since the snow first fell that morning, all those years ago. And Noah, one day, stood by the window and watched the snow come down again. Not from a trapdoor, not from behind reinforced glass, but from the warmth of his real home. He pressed his fingers to the pane, breath fogging the glass. It was quiet, but not empty. And from somewhere inside him, not memory, not certainty, just something soft. A feeling stirred, like a tether reconnecting. A beginning, not of what was lost, but of what might still be found. And over the final frame, the voice returns. Some truths don't stay buried. They claw their way to the surface. And when they do, they change everything. This was only the beginning of the truth.